Caligula's name echoes through history like a whisper of scandal, a symbol of excess, cruelty, and madness. But was he truly insane? Or has time exaggerated his reputation into something larger than life? Step into the world of ancient Rome, where emperors held the power of gods, and where a young man named Gaius, nicknamed Caligula or Little Boots, would rise from a military mascot to the ruler of the greatest empire the world had ever seen. The Romans adored him at first. He was the son of the heroic general Germanicus, a boy who had grown up in the camps, loved by soldiers. To the people, his rise felt like destiny fulfilled. But destiny can be cruel. Within a few short years, Caligula's reign would turn into one of the most infamous stories in imperial history, filled with rumors of madness, cruelty, and divine delusion, or at least, that's how it's been told for centuries. The Rome Caligula inherited was a place of power struggles, shifting loyalties, and simmering paranoia. The empire had only recently emerged from the bloody purges of Emperor Tiberius, a ruler remembered for his suspicion and cruelty. Into this world stepped Caligula, young, charismatic, and at first, a beacon of hope. Crowds cheered when he took power. The Senate welcomed him with relief. He promised to honor his father Germanicus, restore dignity to the office of emperor, and bring back joy to a people weary of Tiberius' dark reign. For a time, he did just that. He organized lavish games, freed political prisoners, and handed out bonuses to soldiers. The people saw him as generous, charming, and kind. For 6 months, Rome believed they had found their golden leader, someone who would bring back the glory days. And then, everything began to change. According to ancient historians like Suetonius and Cassius Dio, Caligula's descent into cruelty and excess began after a severe illness. For weeks, he hovered near death, and when he recovered, he was never the same. Some say the fever left him unhinged. Others argue the taste of absolute power revealed who he truly was. He began to see himself not merely as emperor, but as a living god. Stories tell of him dressing as Jupiter, Apollo, or Venus, demanding worship from his subjects. To some, this was blasphemy, arrogance beyond measure. To others, it was a political stunt, meant to test the loyalty of Rome's elite. Whatever the truth, the image of Caligula as the emperor who declared himself divine has endured for centuries, shaping his legacy as a mad tyrant. But here is where myth and reality blur. Ancient sources love to exaggerate the flaws of emperors, especially those who angered the Senate. Caligula's reign was brief, only 4 years, and many of the stories about his insanity come from hostile writers decades after his death. Did he really make his horse incitatus a cancel, or was that just satire, mocking how he mocked the Senate's dignity? Did he truly squander the empire's wealth on pointless luxuries, or was he redirecting resources in ways his critics disapproved of? These questions remind us that history is not always fact, but often the loudest voice that survives. In Caligula's case, those voices painted him as Rome's ultimate madman. Imagine Rome during his reign. The Colosseum did not yet exist, but amphitheaters and circuses roared with excitement as games and spectacles entertained the masses. Caligula poured money into shows, parades, and chariot races. He loved spectacle, and he knew the people did too. To the ordinary citizen, he may have seemed thrilling, unpredictable, even fun, but to the Senate, who valued tradition and restraint, his behavior was dangerous. He treated them with open contempt, calling them hypocrites, humiliating them in public, and reminding them that true power did not rest in the Senate but in him alone. For the senatorial elite, this was unforgivable. They had tolerated emperors before, but Caligula's disdain cut too deep. Thus began the story of an emperor remembered more for madness than for his policies. Some stories are so outrageous they sound like dark comedy. Suetonius tells us Caligula once declared war on the god Neptune. He supposedly led his troops to the seashore, ordered them to stab the waves with their swords, and then had them collect seashells as the spoils of victory. Was this a genuine act of insanity, or was it staged, a cruel joke at the expense of soldiers and historians alike? We may never know, but the tale fits the image of a ruler detached from reality, someone who blurred the line between divine authority and absurd theater. Whether true or not, it stuck, and over time such stories piled up, transforming Caligula into the ultimate symbol of imperial madness. Behind the scandal, however, lies a darker truth. Rome was not just a city of marble and glory, it was a place of political intrigue and deadly rivalries. Caligula's family had been torn apart by betrayals. His mother was accused of treason. His brothers were executed or exiled. He himself grew up under the shadow of Tiberius' paranoia, living in constant fear of being poisoned or framed. Is it really surprising that when he finally seized power, he lashed out, distrusted everyone, and embraced a persona bigger than life itself? Perhaps his madness was less about insanity and more about survival in a world where emperors were as likely to be murdered as revered. Still, Caligula's reign became infamous for cruelty. Stories tell of him executing rivals without trial, mocking the suffering of his victims, and indulging in sadistic whims. He supposedly forced senators' wives into humiliating situations, emptied the treasury, and demanded divine honors at every turn. To his enemies, these were the acts of a monster. To the people, however, things may have looked different. The crowds enjoyed his games. The soldiers benefited from his generosity. His cruelty, in many cases, was aimed not at the masses, but at the elite who had once looked down on him. And that raises an uncomfortable question. Was Caligula truly mad, or was he simply hated by those who wrote history? As his paranoia deepened, Caligula surrounded himself with guards, spies, and informers. Trust became impossible. Even his closest allies could turn against him. Rome, once hopeful, now whispered of terror in the streets. The Senate seethed with resentment, waiting for an opportunity to strike back. And in the year 41 AD, that opportunity came. A conspiracy formed among the Praetorian Guard, senators, and palace insiders. On a cold January day, they struck, stabbing Caligula in a hallway of his own palace. He was only 28. His body was left mutilated. His reign ended as violently as it had begun. The people mourned, the Senate breathed relief, and history began its long, complicated judgment of Caligula. In the centuries since, Caligula has remained one of Rome's most infamous emperors. His name synonymous with madness and cruelty. But peel back the layers of scandal, and what remains is a man shaped by trauma, power, and politics. Perhaps he was not the lunatic of legend, but a ruler who frightened the wrong people. Perhaps his theatrical stunts were misinterpreted as insanity, or perhaps he truly lost himself in the intoxicating illusion of godhood. Whatever the truth, history endures because it forces us to ask, how much of history is fact, and how much is myth? In the case of Caligula, madness and myth may be forever intertwined. Caligula's early rule was marked by a strange duality. On one hand, he was generous, granting bonuses to the Praetorian Guard and organizing public games that delighted the Roman people. He even released political prisoners and restored works of art stolen by his predecessor. For a while, it felt like Rome was entering a golden age under the young emperor. Yet on the other hand, small cracks began to show. Caligula developed an obsession with being adored, craving not just loyalty but worship. He wanted to be seen not as a man but as something more, something divine. The seeds of excess and eccentricity were being sown, and the whispers of madness were not far behind. His appetite for luxury seemed endless, and his demands on Rome's treasury grew heavier with each passing month. What started as small signs of extravagance soon snowballed into grand displays of vanity, sparking questions among senators and citizens alike. Was this a ruler leading Rome forward, or an actor playing emperor for his own amusement? The duality of Caligula's range, yet erratic, charming yet cruel, was already shaping his legend as both a beloved figure and a looming disaster waiting to unfold. The death of Tiberius had left Rome suspicious and weary, but Caligula initially brought relief. His very first speeches to the Senate dripped with respect, humility, and promises of cooperation. Senators, long bruised by Tiberius's tyranny, felt a cautious sense of hope. But that hope didn't last long. Caligula's relationship with the Senate quickly soured as he began to see them not as partners, but as rivals to be mocked and humiliated. In public assemblies, he would deliver speeches with sharp sarcasm, ridiculing their authority and reminding everyone who truly held the reins of power. At times, he turned politics into theater, staging humiliations not just for his own amusement, but as a brutal reminder of the Senate's impotence. Some historians suggest this wasn't madness, but calculation. Caligula deliberately crushing opposition to centralize power. Yet the way he did it, with biting humor and theatrical cruelty, made it feel like the actions of a man who enjoyed watching Rome's traditions burn. The Senate, once considered Rome's most sacred political body, had been reduced to a prop in Caligula's performance, and that performance was only beginning to grow darker, more lavish, and more dangerous with each passing year. At the heart of Caligula's legend lies the story of ancient accounts describe banquets where food was sprinkled with gold dust, where exotic animals were paraded to lavish halls, and where no expense was too great for the emperor's amusement. He built ships that were essentially floating palaces, complete with marble floors, gardens, and baths, luxuries more suited to land than sea. Guests were stunned by the sheer excess, but also unsettled by the casual way Caligula flaunted Rome's immense wealth, while citizens struggled under heavy taxes. This wasn't generosity, it was spectacle. Caligula seemed less interested in ruling and more fascinated by pushing boundaries of indulgence. Was it madness, or simply a dangerous kind of theater meant to keep Rome in awe of his power? Either way, the emperor's obsession with luxury turned his reign into a carnival of the empire itself began to feel like Caligula's stage, with the people of Rome unwilling extras in a play where the spotlight never left their unpredictable ruler. And in that spotlight, his every move seemed designed to blur the line between emperor and god, leader and performer, man and myth. One of the strangest aspects of Caligula's reign was his relationship with the divine, or rather, his desire to become divine. Unlike other emperors who were worshipped after death, Caligula demanded godlike status while still alive. He had temples built in his honor, and priests assigned to serve him as if he were Jupiter himself. Statues of gods were altered to bear his face, an act that shocked even those used to the vanity of Roman rulers. For the people of Rome, this was more than arrogance, it was sacrilege. The emperor wasn't just asking for loyalty, he was demanding worship. Some historians suggest this obsession with divinity might have stemmed from insecurity, a desperate attempt to cement his place in history. Others believe it was part of his growing instability, a detachment from reality where he could no longer distinguish man from God. Whatever the cause, Caligula's divine pretensions became one of the defining marks of his reign, fueling both fear and resentment. To his supporters, it was evidence of his greatness. To his critics, it was proof of madness, the ultimate sign that Rome's emperor had slipped into delusion. Perhaps the most infamous tale associated with Caligula is his alleged plan to make his horse insipid. According to ancient writers, the emperor lavished his beloved stallion with luxuries fit for a nobleman: a marble stable, jeweled harnesses, and servants dedicated to the horse's care. He supposedly even invited insiders to dine at banquets, offering the animal golden oats. But did Caligula truly intend to elevate his horse to political office? Or was it a theatrical insult aimed at the Senate, a way of saying that even a horse could govern Rome better than they could? Modern historians lean toward the latter, suggesting the story might have been exaggerated to highlight his contempt for Rome's political elite. Still, the image of an emperor preparing to seat his horse in the Senate chamber is one of history's most enduring symbols of imperial absurdity, whether literal or symbolic. The tale of insiders captured exactly what Caligula's reign had become: a blurred line between reality and performance, where cruelty and comedy danced side by side on Rome's grand stage. But Caligula's story wasn't all extravagance and insults, there was also violence. Tales of his cruelty spread like wildfire, painting him as a ruler who delighted in suffering. He is said to have executed nobles on flimsy charges, punished families by forcing them to watch their loved ones die, and even turned the gladiatorial games into personal theaters of cruelty. At times, he allegedly ordered executions simply to fill dull moments, as though death itself was a form of entertainment. These accounts may have been exaggerated by hostile historians, but even stripped of embellishment, they reveal a disturbing trend. Power had given Caligula a taste for control over life and death, and he wielded it with chilling cap. For the people of Rome, this wasn't just disturbing, it was terrifying. An emperor who could decide your fate on a whim was no longer a protector but a predator. Whether driven by madness, insecurity, or sheer lust for dominance, Caligula's cruelty marked a turning point in his reputation. The once celebrated golden boy was now feared as a tyrant, and Rome began to whisper about how long such a reign could truly last. It's important, though, to pause and ask, how much of this is truth and how much is myth? Most of all we know about Caligula comes from ancient historians like Suetonius, Tacitus, and Cassius, who wrote years after his death, and often with clear bias. They painted him as a monster. But was that history or propaganda? After all, portraying a murdered emperor as insane helped justify his assassination. Some scholars suggest Caligula may not have been uniquely cruel, but simply more theatrical than his predecessors. Many emperors executed rivals, spent lavishly, and demanded loyalty. What set Caligula apart was the way his actions were remembered through the lens of scandal and ridicule. By asking whether Caligula was truly mad or unfairly maligned, we uncover another layer of his legacy. The power of storytelling itself. Was Rome remembering a man, or a myth, carefully crafted to warn future rulers of unchecked ambition? In the end, Caligula might have been both a flawed man whose eccentricities were real, but exaggerated into legend, ensuring his name would forever stand as a symbol of imperial excess. Another layer to Caligula's story is the impact of illness. Ancient accounts suggest that early in his reign, he suffered a mysterious and severe sickness that nearly killed him. Some historians argue that this illness may have triggered neurological or psychological changes, fueling the erratic behavior that followed. Before the illness, Caligula was remembered as generous and charismatic. Afterward, his cruelty and paranoia seemed to intensify. Could it be that Rome's infamous mad emperor was in fact a victim of brain damage or lingering trauma? Modern scholars speculate conditions like epilepsy, encephalitis, or even lead poisoning from Roman plumbing may have played a role. If true, this reframes the narrative. Caligula wasn't simply a monster choosing chaos, but a man whose mind was fractured by forces beyond his control. While it doesn't excuse the cruelty attributed to him, it adds a layer of tragedy to his story. The young man celebrated as Rome's hope may have been undone not just by power, but by illness, turning a promising ruler into the legendary tyrant remembered today. Caligula's family ties also fueled the drama. He was a descendant of both Augustus, through his mother's side, and Mark Antony, through his father's, giving him a claim to Rome's most powerful bloodlines. But family in Rome was rarely a blessing. It was a battlefield. He grew up surrounded by suspicion, betrayals, and executions, many orchestrated by Tiberius himself. Caligula witnessed the dangers of ambition firsthand, learning that survival in the imperial family required both charm and ruthlessness. By the time he became emperor, these lessons may have already shaped his worldview. Trust no one, strike first, and use spectacle to distract from weakness. His sisters, particularly Drusilla, were drawn into his story as symbols of both loyalty and scandal. Ancient writers hinted at inappropriate closeness, though again, such tales may have been exaggerated to tarnish his name. Whether fact or fiction, his family ties were central to his rise and fall, intertwining personal drama with political intrigue. For Caligula, bloodline was both crown and curse, and in the ruthless world of Roman politics, even family could become fuel for legend. The downfall of Caligula came as swiftly as his rise. By the 4th year of his reign, conspiracies were already brewing. Senators, Praetorian guards, and even members of his household grew weary of his insults, his extravagance, and his unpredictable wrath. For the Senate, he was a tyrant, mocking their traditions. For the guard, he was a danger who couldn't be trusted to keep Rome stable. On a cold January day in 41 CE, Caligula was cornered by conspirators and stabbed to death. His reign cut short in brutal fashion. His wife and young daughter were also murdered, as if to erase his line from history entirely. Yet even in death, Caligula defied Rome's attempt to forget him. His memory survived, not as a footnote, but as a symbol of madness, cruelty, and the dangers of unchecked power. Whether or not the stories of his insanity were true, his name became shorthand for the corruption of absolute authority. And perhaps that's the greatest twist of all. In trying to destroy him, Roman short Caligula would live forever in history. A amalgamation. Caligula's rise to power was nothing short of dramatic. When he first stepped onto the throne of Rome in 37 CE, he was hailed as the beloved son of the empire. People saw him as the young phoenix rising from the ashes of past turmoil. His father, Germanicus, had been a hero to the people, and Caligula inherited not only his name but the aura of hope that came with it. At first, citizens thought they finally had a ruler who could balance compassion with strength. Statues were raised, coins stamped with his profile, and streets filled with cheers as he paraded through the city. For a fleeting moment, Rome believed it had found stability, but like a mask slipping during a performance, cracks began to appear. What started as charm and charisma slowly turned into unpredictability, leaving senators whispering behind closed doors and citizens wondering if their golden prince was in fact something darker entirely. At the beginning of his reign, Caligula's generosity stunned everyone. He gave out lavish games, gladiatorial spectacles, and banquets that dazzled both citizens and foreign guests. He even abolished certain taxes to lighten the burdens of ordinary Romans. For a time, people adored him as a ruler who understood the struggles of everyday life. His public image seemed to blend the best qualities of a caring leader and a powerful emperor. Yet, beneath this glittering surface was a mind increasingly slipping into paranoia and what the people did not know was that Caligula's taste for spectacle would soon spiral far beyond generosity. His love for entertainment and grandiosity would morph into cruelty cloaked as performance. The man who had once been praised as Rome's hope began inching toward a legacy of fear, where every gift carried a hidden cost and every laugh masked looming dread. Historians often debate whether Caligula truly went mad or whether his actions were simply the ultimate expression of unchecked power. After all, Rome had seen eccentric emperors before, but Caligula seemed to push the boundaries of behavior into uncharted territory. He was known for humiliating senators, forcing them to participate in demeaning performances, and mocking the very traditions that had once defined the empire. Some ancient sources claim he even declared himself a living god, demanding worship and temples in his honor. While this sounds absurd to modern ears, in Rome's complex political and religious landscape, such a declaration was more than arrogance. It was dangerous theater. Was Caligula truly delusional, believing in his divine status, or was he deliberately using shock tactics to keep everyone under his control? Either way, his reign blurred the lines between performance, politics, and pure madness, leaving behind a story that still unsettles imaginations today. Caligula's relationship with the Senate was particularly poisonous. At first, senators welcomed him warmly, relieved to see a young, charismatic figure after the darker years under Tiberius. But Caligula quickly turned their support into humiliation. He enjoyed watching Rome's most powerful men squirm, forcing them to grovel, perform absurd tasks, or even fund his reckless projects. In some accounts, he marked their dignity so thoroughly that entire families feared falling out of his favor. The Senate, once a proud institution of the Republic, became little more than actors in Caligula's twisted play. He blurred the line between governance and spectacle, ruling with ridicule rather than respect. This power dynamic left Rome unstable, as decisions were made not for the benefit of the people but to satisfy Caligula's whims. What had started as admiration quickly soured into resentment, and beneath the marble floors of the Senate House, whispers of conspiracy began to grow louder. Among Caligula's most infamous acts was his relationship with wealth. Money flowed through his hands like water, and he seemed determined to spend Rome into ruin. He built extravagant palaces, constructed floating pleasure ships, and hosted endless games that drained the imperial treasury. Ancient writers claim he once demanded that vast amounts of gold be melted down to decorate his palace, simply because he could. But beyond material waste, it was the message that mattered. Caligula wanted everyone to know he was untouchable, beyond limits. To the average Roman, these excesses were both entertaining and terrifying. They watched their emperor behave less like a ruler and more like a god playing with the resources of an empire. The tension between spectacle and sustainability became sharper with each passing year, and the empire trembled under the weight of his indulgence. Caligula's fascination with divinity added yet another layer to his complex character. It wasn't enough for him to be emperor. He wanted to be seen as divine in the flesh. He reportedly dressed as gods like Apollo, Mercury, or even Venus, parading before the people as if he were the embodiment of multiple deities. This wasn't mere eccentricity. In a society where gods shaped every aspect of life, such performances unsettled traditional boundaries. Priests were ordered to treat him as divine, temples were repurposed in his honor, and even sacrifices were made in his name. To some, it was blasphemy. To others, it was theater on a cosmic scale. But either way, Caligula's insistence on divine identity challenged Rome's spiritual core, making his rule not just a political disruption, but a cultural earthquake that left cracks long after his death. The personal life of Caligula was just as controversial as his public one. Ancient sources describe scandalous relationships and rumors that blurred the line between truth and propaganda, whether exaggerated or not. These stories painted him as a man driven by desire and lacking restraint. Tales of affairs with married women, inappropriate liaisons, and shocking acts swirled throughout Rome, fueling his image as an emperor with no boundaries. In a city where gossip was as powerful as politics, such rumors served to both entertain and terrify. The people may not have known exactly what was true, but they understood the message. Their emperor was unpredictable, and no one, whether senator, citizen, or ebon family, was truly safe from his impulses. Despite his chaos, Caligula also had moments of startling intelligence. He understood the psychology of control, knowing how to manipulate fear and awe in equal measure. By keeping people off balance, he ensured they never felt secure enough to challenge him outright. His unpredictability became a weapon, making senators hesitate, generals second-guess, and citizens whisper rather than rebel. In sense, Caligula was less a fool and more a master of spectacle, turning his own instability into political armor. It raises the question: was he truly consumed by madness? Or did he cleverly wield the appearance of madness as a tool for domination? Perhaps the truth lies in the murky space between, where brilliance and instability dance, and dangerous partnership. Caligula's reign may have been short, but it burned with intensity. In just under 4 years, he managed to shift Rome's political landscape, destabilize its traditions, and leave scars that would echo for generations. His assassination in 41 CE was brutal, but perhaps inevitable, carried out by men who had once pledged loyalty but could no longer stomach the chaos. Even his death, however, could not erase his legacy. Stories of his excess, his cruelty, and his bizarre performances endured, becoming a blend of history and legend. For centuries, writers, artists, and filmmakers have returned to Caligula's story, drawn by the unsettling mix of power, madness, and spectacle. His life remains a cautionary tale of what happens when one man is given limitless authority with no boundaries. In the end, Caligula's story leaves us with a haunting question. Was he truly insane? Or was he simply the product of a system that allowed absolute power to corrupt absolutely? Whether seen as a tragic figure consumed by his own mind, or a cunning manipulator who reveled in pushing Rome's limits, Caligula stands as one of history's most captivating figures. His reign was a blur of laughter and fear, generosity and cruelty, humanity and divinity, and perhaps that is why he continues to fascinate us today, because within this story, we glimpse the fragile line between leadership and tyranny, between myth and reality, between madness and the cold calculation of power. His legacy is not just a tale of Rome's past, but a timeless reminder of the dangers that lurk when spectacle replaces substance at the heart of leadership. Caligula's story is as much about power as it is about perception. Imagine stepping into the shoes of a young man suddenly given absolute control over the Roman Empire. Overnight, every whisper in the palace halls, every bow from senators, every salute from gods reminded him he was no longer just Gaius, but Caesar, Lord of millions. Some historians say the pressure itself could crack anyone's mind. The expectations were enormous. Rome had seen powerful emperors before, but none quite as young and untested as him. To some, his eccentricities were the antics of youth, magnified by unchecked power. To others, they were symptoms of madness taking root. The real question is, how much of what we know about Caligula comes from truth, and how much comes from stories written by his enemies who had every reason to make him look like a monster? When power meets rumor, history often blurs. One of the strangest accusations tied to Caligula is his relationship with his horse. Ancient writers claimed he adored this animal so much that he built a marble stable, decorated it with jewels, and even planned to make the horse a consul of Rome. Now, think about that. Was this genuine madness, or could it have been a clever piece of satire? By pretending his horse could serve as a senator, Caligula might have been mocking the Senate itself, exposing them as powerless compared to him. To his supporters, it could have been a joke that highlighted his authority. To his enemies, it was evidence of a deranged mind unfit for rule. Like many parts of his story, it's difficult to separate fact from exaggeration, leaving us with an image that's both comical and disturbing. Caligula's reign was also marked by acts of generosity that often get overshadowed by tales of cruelty. At the start of his rule, he handed out bonuses to soldiers, provided games for the people, and even declared amnesties for prisoners. For a brief moment, Rome adored him, streets filled with cheering crowds, grateful for an emperor who seemed to care. But public favor is a fragile thing, especially in a city as politically charged as Rome. Soon, these grand gestures were drowned out by stories of erratic behavior and increasingly bizarre demands. It's almost as if two Caligulas existed. One the benevolent young ruler, the other a figure of fear and mockery. Perhaps that's why his legacy is so confusing, because the lines between kindness and cruelty kept shifting. The whispers of extravagance were constant. Banquets said to last 4 days, fountains flowing with wine, treasures thrown away as if gold was worthless dust. While these accounts paint Caligula as reckless, they also highlight how perception shapes legacy. Was he truly this wasteful? Or were these tales inflated to discredit him? The Senate, after all, had little love for emperors who reduced that power. By painting Caligula as insane, they could justify later actions taken against him. Still, even if some stories were exaggerated, they reveal a truth about how absolute power can warp priorities. For Caligula, every action became a stage performance, and Rome itself was his unwilling audience. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of his rule was the fear he inspired. Ancient texts tell us of executions ordered on a whim, of nobles humiliated in public, of allies suddenly turned into enemies overnight. Whether or not these events happened exactly as described, the atmosphere of dread was real. Imagine living in a city where one man's moods determined your fate. A smile could mean riches. A frown could mean death. That was the Rome of Caligula, a place where stability was fragile and survival meant keeping your head down, literally and figuratively. His unpredictability became a weapon, ensuring no one around him ever felt secure. At the heart of Caligula's story lies the question of mental illness. Modern scholars debate whether his supposed madness was a genuine condition, the result of a serious illness, or simply the outcome of political slander. Some point to an illness early in his reign that may have damaged his health and possibly his mind. Others argue that the image of the mad emperor is simply too convenient a narrative, crafted to explain away his assassination. After all, labeling a ruler as insane makes it easier to justify their removal. This angle forces us to ask, do we really know Caligula? Or do we only know the character others wanted us to see? Family drama also played a massive role in his downfall. The Julio-Claudian dynasty was rife with betrayal, suspicion, and rivalries. Caligula grew up surrounded by plots and executions, watching his family rise and fall at the whims of power. It's not hard to see how paranoia might take root in such an environment. Trust was rare in Rome's ruling circles. To survive, one had to assume betrayal was always around the corner. If Caligula lashed out, maybe it was an pure magnicite, might have been the learned survival strategy of a man raised in a political battlefield. When you expect enemies everywhere, even friends can look like threats. His assassination in 41 AD shocked Rome, but didn't entirely surprise it. By then, both the Senate and the Praetorian Guard had reasons to turn against him. According to accounts, he was struck down in a palace corridor, ending a reign that lasted only 4 years. The aftermath was chaos, with Rome scrambling to fill the sudden vacuum of leadership. In many ways, Caligula's death marked not just the end of his rule, but also the beginning of a narrative carefully crafted by those who survived him. Once he was gone, his enemies controlled the story, and they ensured it would not be flattering. Despite the blood and scandal, Caligula's name lived on as a cultural symbol. Plays, books, films, and even modern pop culture often return to his image as the Mad Emperor, a figure both terrifying and oddly fascinating. He embodies the dangers of unchecked power, the thin line between leader and tyrant, and the way history loves to exaggerate extremes. Whether he was truly insane or simply the victim of history's harshest critics, his story remains compelling because it taps into something universal: the fear of what happens when one person holds too much power. So, Was Caligula truly mad? Or is his madness a myth, carefully constructed by his enemies? The answer may never be clear, lost in the haze of biased records and political agendas. But perhaps that uncertainty is what keeps his story alive. He was both a ruler and a riddle, a man who lived too briefly yet left a shadow stretching across centuries. In the end, Caligula forces us to reflect not only on him, but on the nature of power, perception, and the stories we choose to believe. That's why, 2,000 years later, his name still sparks debate, curiosity, and fascination. Caligula's love for spectacle wasn't just about entertaining the masses. It was also his way of sending a message. When he staged games or wild performances, he wasn't merely giving Rome a show. He was reminding them who held the purse strings, who had the power to make lions roar in the arena, and gladiators bleed for applause. These events cost enormous sums of money, and while many citizens loved the excitement, senators and elites worried about the drain on the treasury. Caligula seemed unconcerned. To him, money was endless. As long as he was emperor, his extravagance wasn't just indulgence. It was strategy. By making people reliant on his generosity, he kept them loyal. Yet, behind the cheers and applause, resentment brewed among Rome's upper class. They saw a leader too focused on popularity and not enough on stability. But Caligula thrived on this edge-balancing admiration from the crowd and disdain from the elites. To him, conflict itself was theater, and he was always center stage. Whether history paints him as mad or brilliant, his obsession with spectacle reveals a deeper truth. Power isn't only enforced with soldiers, it's sustained with performance, illusion, and control of perception. One of the most striking things about Caligula was how he blurred the line between ruler and entertainer. He wasn't content with being just another emperor in a long line of Caesars. He wanted to be unforgettable. Some stories suggest he even performed on stage, dancing and singing. Socing, Rome, conservative, elite, too many senators. This was humiliating. They believed emperors should remain dignified, above common theatrics. But Caligula didn't care. In fact, he may have done it precisely because it scandalized him. By stepping into the role of both ruler and performer, he claimed absolute control not just of Rome's politics, but also of its imagination. This blurred identity made him unpredictable, and unpredictability is power. No one knew whether the emperor would enter the Senate to debate law or step onto a stage to deliver a performance. That uncertainty kept everyone on edge, which meant Caligula was always the one directing the script. Madness or genius? It depends on whether you think his performances weakened the empire or strengthened his grip. Either way, Caligula understood something crucial. Attention is power, and no emperor before him wielded it so deliberately. Caligula's sense of humor was infamous and dangerous. He was said to enjoy mocking senators, often making cruel jokes at their expense in public. Imagine being a proud Roman noble, dressed in your finest toga, only to be humiliated by the emperor himself in front of the crowd. To some, this was evidence of cruelty, but it may also have been a calculated move. By cutting down the Senate's pride, Caligula kept them submissive. If senators laughed, they looked weak. If they protested, they risked his wrath. Either way, he won. His mockery extended even further. Ancient sources claim he once invited guests to a lavish banquet, only to order them killed afterward, joking that it added spice to the evening. Whether true or exaggerated, the fact that people believed it shows how powerful his reputation was. Fear and laughter became his tools. And in Rome, nothing undermines authority faster than becoming the butt of a joke. Caligula flipped that dynamic. He made everyone else the punchline while ensuring he was always the one holding the microphone. Was it madness, or a dark understanding of how humiliation can reinforce dominance? The emperor's relationship with religion was another realm where myth and reality blur. Caligula wasn't content with being just a political ruler. He wanted divinity. Some accounts say he demanded to be worshipped as a living god, building temples to himself and even placing his statue in the Temple of Jerusalem, a move that nearly sparked revolt. To Romans, emperors often received divine honors after death, but Caligula didn't want to wait. Was this arrogance, or was he making a statement about the nature of power? By claiming godhood, He wasn't simply asking for worship, he was dismantling the boundary between man and deity. This frightened the elite and angered religious groups. But for ordinary citizens, the line between emperor and god was already thin. By pushing it further, Caligula cemented his rule in a way laws and armies never could. Of course, critics framed this as blasphemous madness. But perhaps Caligula understood that in a city obsessed with rituals and omens, the ultimate authority wasn't the Senate, it was the gods, and if he could make himself one of them, who could possibly challenge his reign? Caligula's love of spectacle often veered into the bizarre. Ancient writers describe him parading through Rome dressed as gods like Apollo or Jupiter, complete with costumes and crowns. Some mocked these displays as childish roleplay, but they carried a deeper message. Rome was a city of symbolism. Every gesture, statue, and ritual carried weight. By embodying gods in public, Caligula wasn't just entertaining himself. He was rewriting the story of Rome, with himself at its center. To the common people, seeing their emperor dressed as Hercules might not have been absurd. It might have been Owens, yet to the Senate, these acts were another humiliation. Reducing Rome's secret traditions into costume parties. Who was right? Perhaps both. Caligula's theatrics could be read as ridiculous excess, but also as propaganda genius. By controlling the spectacle, he controlled interpretation. Whether people laughed, cheered, or grumbled, all eyes remained fixed on him. And in politics, being unforgettable is sometimes more powerful than being respected. That might have been Caligula's true game. Not seeking approval, but ensuring he could never be ignored. Money flowed like water under Caligula's rule, or at least it did until the treasury ran dry. He inherited a surplus from Tiberius, but spent it lavishly on games, banquets, and ambitious building projects. Critics accused him of recklessness, draining Rome's wealth to fund his vanity. Yet, spending money wasn't just indulgence, it was politics. The more he gave, the more the people adored him. Free food, extravagant games, and wild spectacles bought loyalty in a way laws could not. Of course, this left Rome financially unstable. But in Caligula's mind, the present mattered more than the future. His reign was about immediacy, pleasure, spectacle, control. Was this irresponsible? Possibly, but it also highlights a brutal truth of politics. Sometimes survival today is worth more than stability tomorrow. Caligula gambled Rome's fortune for the cheers of the masses, and for a time, it worked. His popularity among common people soared, even as senators fumed over empty coffers. To him, money wasn't wealth, it was applause converted into gold. Perhaps the most notorious story about Caligula is a supposed plan to make his horse Incitus a consul. Ancient writers claimed the emperor lavished his horse with marble stables, jeweled collars, and even servants. To later historians, this was proof of madness on emperor. So detached from reality, he treated an animal as a statesman. But what if it wasn't insanity? What if it was satire? By elevating a horse, Caligula may have been mocking the Senate, suggesting even a beast could perform their duties. It was a savage joke, but also a message. Senators were powerless, their titles meaningless unless he willed it. To the elite, this was humiliating. To the public, it was outrageous theater. In later case, Caligula once again positioned himself as the director of Rome's most controversial play. Was Incitus really a future consul? Or was he just the punchline of a grand insult? We may never know, but the story survives because it captures the essence of Caligula's rule. Unpredictable, theatrical, and always aimed at keeping everyone else off balance. Caligula's treatment of his family also fed the legend of his instability. After initially honoring his sisters with public titles and privileges, he later turned against them, accusing them of betrayal. Some sources suggest he used them for political theater, parading their loyalty before eventually condemning them in dramatic fashion. This whiplash behavior baffled observers. Was it paranoia? Or was it calculated cruelty? In Rome, family wasn't just personal, it was political currency. By elevating and then discarding his own kin, Caligula showed that no bond was above his authority. Even blood ties could be rewritten a spectacle. This horrified traditionalists who believed family honor was sacred. but it reinforced a darker truth. Under Caligula, loyalty wasn't inherited, it was performed. Family members were not safe from becoming props in his empire-wide drama, whether out of fear, jealousy, or cold strategy. His treatment of kin added another layer to the myth. A ruler so consumed by his narrative that even family roles could be cast and recast at his whim. Paragraph 9. The tension between Caligula and the Senate eventually became unbearable. The senators saw him as reckless, humiliating, and dangerous to Rome's traditions. He, in turn, saw them as arrogant relics, clinging to power he had already stripped away. The relationship spiraled into open hostility, with rumors of conspiracies and plots circulating constantly. Caligula responded with threats, executions, and more mockery, ensuring no senator could ever feel secure. To the outside world, this looked like Mutnasan Emperor destroying the very class meant to support him, but perhaps it was deliberate. By destabilizing the Senate, Caligula removed any illusion of shared power. He ruled alone, without compromise. Of course, this kind of tension couldn't last forever. Rome's political machine thrived on balance, and Caligula had tipped the scale too far. His constant battles with the Senate set the stage for his downfall, but also highlighted the essence of his rule. Absolute domination, enforced through fear and spectacle. No matter the cost, Caligula's reign was short just for years, but the chaos he created still echoes today. Ancient sources, written mostly by senators who hated him, painted him as a monster, a mad emperor who bled Rome dry, mocked traditions, and claimed godhood. Yet, beneath the exaggerations and scandal lies a man who understood something timeless. Power isn't just about armies, laws, or gold. It's about perception. Caligula manipulated that perception constantly through humor, spectacle, cruelty, and shock. Whether he was truly insane or simply a master of theater, the result was the same. Rome couldn't stop watching. His legacy endures not because of his policies or battles, but because of the stories, some true, some mythos, still fascinate us 2,000 years later. Was he a madman, or a genius who weaponized spectacle? The truth may never be clear, but maybe that's the point. Caligula ensured his reign would never be forgotten, and in that sense, he succeeded beyond any emperor's wildest dream. By the time Caligula fully took control as emperor, the palace had transformed into something resembling a theater of unpredictability. Guards whispered anxiously in corridors, servants exchanged glances, and senators tiptoed around rumors that seemed too strange to believe. Tales circulated of him, speaking to shadows, holding midnight councils with invisible advisors, and demanding unwavering obedience. While some accounts may have been exaggerated, the perception of erratic behavior alone was enough to shape his reputation. Rome had seen eccentric leaders before, but Caligula's actions blurred the line between madness and strategic brilliance. Some historians argue that he used spectacle deliberately, turning fear, and gossip into tools to manipulate his court. The palace became a stage, each decree, joke, and odd command performing a dual role: entertaining, alarming, and demonstrating authority, whether a reflection of personality, psychological stress, or calculated strategy. These behaviors left a lasting impression, creating an aura of unpredictability that fascinated and terrified the people of Rome alike. The emperor's reign was now inseparable from the legend of his volatile persona. Perhaps the most famous story about Caligula involves his horse. Ancient writers describe him lavishing the animal with a marble stable, golden feeding bowls, purple blankets, and even the potential. Modern scholars debate whether these accounts were literal or exaggerated. Yet the story persists because it captures imagination. Beyond absurdity, there may have been a sharp political edge. By elevating a horse above senators, he might have been mocking the elite, exposing their impotence, or blind obedience. Alternatively, it could have been sheer spectacle, designed to shock and amuse, regardless of intent. The image of Caligula treating a horse as a political figure reinforced the perception of eccentricity. Even if part of the tale is legend, inside us symbolizes the strange blend of performance, humor, and power that defined his reign. It demonstrates how rumor, theatricality, and political strategy were intertwined, making Caligula an unforgettable figure in Rome's history. The horse, pampered beyond imagination, became a living metaphor for the emperor's audacity and ability to challenge convention. Caligula's extravagant displays often served political purposes beyond mere indulgence. Massive games, grand public works, and lavish distributions of wealth may have seemed reckless, but in a society that thrived on spectacle, these actions secured loyalty and distracted citizens from unrest. Generosity to the public contrasted with unpredictability toward senators, creating dual personas: a benevolent entertainer to the masses and a tyrant to the elite. From a modern perspective, these contradictions appear irrational, yet they reflect strategic thinking. The emperor understood the power of perception, using public generosity as a form of psychological influence. Spectacle functioned as both entertainment and governance, reinforcing authority in a culture where appearance mattered immensely. Through these displays, Caligula cultivated loyalty, fear, and fascination simultaneously. His reign shows how performance and power were inseparable, blurring the line between madness and political acumen. Even today, these actions provoke debate about whether he was impulsive, strategic, or somewhere in between, making his legacy as complex as it is notorious. Family dynamics shaped both Caligula's character and the stories surrounding him. Raised in a household filled with political ambition and danger, he witnessed betrayal, exile, and murder from a young age. His mother, Agrippina the Elder, wielded influence fiercely, and his sisters navigated power in ways that rivaled emperors themselves. Exposure to such a high-stakes environment may have influenced his behavior, fostering traits interpreted as cruelty or eccentricity. Historians suggest that some accounts of his alleged madness were exaggerated by rivals or survivors seeking to justify their own positions. History is rarely neutral. It is often written to entertain or caution. Caligula's upbringing in a politically ruthless family, coupled with sudden absolute power, may explain behaviors contemporaries labeled mad. Modern readers, viewing these accounts with skepticism, recognize the possibility that his actions were responses to extreme pressure, psychological survival, or strategic performance. The intersection of family, politics, and personal histories, critical to understanding the emperor's complex persona. Financial extravagance defined much of Caligula's reign and fueled stories of recklessness. He spent enormous sums on construction projects, lavish games, and personal indulgences, prompting criticism from historians and senators alike. Yet these expenditures may have had political purpose. Displaying wealth and abundance reinforced his authority and divine-like image. In a society where appearances shaped perceptions of power, such lavishness functioned as psychological influence over citizens and elites. By presenting himself as generous, untouchable, and extravagant, Caligula cultivated loyalty, admiration, and even fear. While modern observers may interpret this as irrational, in context, it was strategic theater. Extravagance and spectacle worked together to amplify authority, creating an aura of unpredictability that enhanced his mystique. Whether impulsive or deliberate, these financial displays solidified his presence in public consciousness and contributed to the enduring legend of a ruler who was impossible to ignore. Accounts of Caligula's cruelty dominate historical narratives. Senators and elites allegedly suffered humiliation, torture, or execution on whim, yet the reliability of such reports is questionable. Ancient writers often wrote with bias, amplifying horror to entertain or justify political agendas. Even if partially true, these stories highlight how fear was employed as a tool of control. By keeping powerful individuals off balance, Caligula ensured compliance and maintained dominance. The atmosphere of unpredictability reinforced his reputation and psychological grip on Rome. His alleged cruelty, whether fact, exaggeration, or performance, exemplifies how narrative shapes historical memory. The emperor's reign demonstrates that the perception of terror can be as effective as law in controlling a society, leaving behind a legacy that blends reality with myth in a way that continues to captivate. Caligula's claims of divinity are among the most enduring aspects of his legend. Reports describe him demanding worship, building temples in his honor, and expecting rituals normally reserved for gods. While shocking to contemporaries, some historians argue these actions were political strategy, designed to consolidate authority by elevating him above tradition and rivals. In Rome, association with divine power reinforced legitimacy and commanded obedience. From a modern viewpoint, this appears audacious, even irrational, yet in context, it could have been calculated, theatrical, and deeply strategic. Caligula's reign illustrates how religion, politics, and performance intersected, and how asserting divinity could function as a form of psychological control. His actions highlight the blurred boundaries between eccentricity, authority, and genius in one of history's most fascinating rulers. Modern scholars sometimes speculate on Caligula's mental state, exploring possibilities of neurological illness, trauma, or extreme personality traits. While retroactive diagnosis is speculative, it underscores the pressures of ruling an empire at a young age. The combination of inherited political danger, isolation at the top, and absolute power could produce behaviors contemporaries deemed mad. Whether caused by pathology or environment, his actions reflect the immense psychological weight of leadership in Rome. Caligula's story demonstrates the complex interplay between personality, circumstance, and perception. His reign is a vivid case study of how extraordinary power can magnify human tendencies, blurring the line between genius, madness, and theatricality. Rome itself amplified the legend of Caligula. Senators, citizens, and historians contributed to narratives that highlighted eccentricity and cruelty, sometimes exaggerating events to entertain or moralize. Rumors, sensational accounts, and political agendas intertwined, creating a reputation that outlived him. Over time, the boundary between reality and myth became increasingly unclear. The perception of madness often overshadowed nuance, demonstrating how historical memory can be shaped more by storytelling than fact. Caligula's legend serves as a reminder of the power of narrative, where perception can rival reality in its influence on legacy. Ultimately, Caligula's life forces reflection on history, perception, and the allure of extremes. Tales of extravagance, cruelty, and divine pretension endure because they are dramatic and memorable. Whether truly mad or simply a master of perception, his reign illustrates how extraordinary behavior, combined with rumor and storytelling, creates legends. Caligula's story highlights the interplay of reality, psychology, and narrative, showing that the line between truth and myth is often determined by those who record history. His life continues to intrigue, fascinate, and challenge assumptions about power, human behavior, and the way societies remember their rulers. Caligula's approach to public entertainment reveals much about his complex personality. He organized gladiatorial games, theatrical performances, and chariot races with unprecedented scale, often funding these spectacles extravagantly. From the imperial treasury, citizens flocked to arenas, marveling at the abundance and feeling personally connected to an emperor who seemed to care about their amusement. Critics, particularly senators, derided these displays as wasteful and excessive, yet from a political standpoint, they reinforced his popularity. What appears as indulgence might also have been strategic, a way to cultivate loyalty and distract the populace from political unrest. Spectacle became a tool, blending governance with theater. In an era without social media, grand public events were the emperor's way to craft image and command attention. Through these performances, he showed charisma, audacity, and authority simultaneously, whether motivated by ego, strategy, or impulsive pleasure. Caligula's public spectacles left an enduring impression. They cemented the perception of a ruler who was larger than life, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. Blurring the line between madness and mastery of influence, Caligula's relationship with the Senate was a tense mix of fear, power, and theatrics. The senators, accustomed to influence behind closed doors, often found themselves mocked or sidelined by the young emperor. Some historians suggest his behavior was vindictive, while others see deliberate strategy. By humiliating elites and keeping them uncertain, he maintained control. Unpredictability became a tool, shaping political dynamics and demonstrating absolute authority. Caligula's interactions with the Senate revealed the complexities of Roman politics, where public display, private negotiation, and rumor intertwined. The fear and uncertainty he cultivated ensured that even the most powerful could not challenge him openly. While modern eyes may see chaos, the emperor's maneuvers were carefully tuned performances and psychological dominance. This relationship illustrates the precarious balance between authority and tradition, and how innovation and audacity could redefine power structures in Rome. The story of Incitatus Caligula's horse continues to fascinate historians and the public alike. By allegedly granting the animal a marble stable, luxurious blankets, and consideration for a political office, Caligula blurred the boundaries between absurdity and commentary. Some scholars argue that elevating a horse above senators was a subtle critique of the elite's inefficacy, forcing them to confront their owner. Others see it as pure spectacle, designed to shock and entertain. Regardless, the tale conveys the emperor's mastery of perception in theater. Incitatus becomes a symbol of audacity and strategic performance, demonstrating that power could be exercised as much through spectacle as through policy. The story persists because it is unforgettable. A ruler capable of turning even a horse into a political statement, showcasing how myth and reality intertwine in shaping historical legacy. Caligula's financial habits have fueled both fascination and critique. Lavish spending on construction, games, and personal indulgences drew accusations of recklessness. Yet, these expenditures projected authority, abundance, and divine-like status. In a culture obsessed with perception, wealth was a tool of influence. Extravagance communicated untouchability, cultivated loyalty, and instilled awe, reinforcing the emperor's control over both citizens and elites. What some interpreted as impulsive indulgence may also have been calculated performance. By blending spectacle with political strategy, he ensured that Rome's attention remained fixed on him, enhancing both visibility and authority. Financial audacity, therefore, was inseparable from Caligula's theatrical approach to governance, contributing to the mythos that still captivates audiences centuries later. Allegations of cruelty dominate narratives of Caligula's reign. Reports describe senators executed, humiliated, or threatened without warning. Yet ancient historians often wrote with bias, exaggerating for dramatic or political effect. Even if partially true, fear served as a powerful instrument of control. By keeping the elite uncertain and off balance, Caligula maintained dominance and discouraged dissent. The perceived unpredictability amplified his authority, demonstrating the psychological power of terror. Whether these accounts reflect reality, exaggeration, or intentional performance, they underscore the emperor's sophisticated understanding of perception. In many ways, Caligula's legacy is as much about the narrative of fear as it is about the actual deeds themselves. His story exemplifies how power, performance, and perception can intertwine to create a lasting, if unsettling, reputation. Divine pretensions were a cornerstone of Caligula's image. He reportedly demanded worship, constructed temples in his honor, and expected rituals reserved for gods. To contemporaries, these actions were shocking, but politically, they were strategic. Aligning with the divine elevated authority above tradition and rivals, religious symbolism reinforced obedience, making disobedience both socially and psychologically daunting. From a modern perspective, the behavior seems audacious, perhaps even irrational. Yet within the context of Roman culture, it served as calculated theatricality. Caligula's use of divinity illustrates the intersection of religion, politics, and performance, demonstrating how belief and authority can be intertwined. His reputation as a mad emperor may partly stem from the audacity of these divine claims, which challenged societal norms and solidified his unforgettable image. Modern historians and psychologists sometimes attempt to diagnose Caligula, examining whether neurological issues, trauma, or personality traits shaped his behavior. While speculative, such analyses highlight the pressures of ascending to absolute power at a young age. Exposure to a dangerous political environment, combined with isolation and overwhelming authority, could create behaviors contemporaries labeled as irrational, whether influenced by pathology, upbringing, or strategic manipulation. Caligula's actions illustrate the psychological impact of absolute power. His reign serves as a case study in how extreme circumstances and extraordinary authority can amplify human tendencies, making the line between genius, madness, and performance difficult to discern. Rome itself contributed heavily to the legend of Caligula. Senators, citizens, and historians propagated tales, emphasizing eccentricity and cruelty, often embellishing events for dramatic effect. Rumors and political agendas intertwined, creating a reputation that endured long after his death. Over time, the distinction between fact and myth became blurred. The perception of madness often overshadowed nuance, demonstrating how collective storytelling shapes historical memory. Caligula's story shows that the legend of a ruler can be as influential as their actual deeds, with narrative shaping legacy across generations. The fascination with Caligula persists because of the extremes his life represents. Tales of extravagance, cruelty, and divine self-promotion capture attention and imagination, remaining dramatic and memorable. Whether truly insane or a master of perception, his reign exemplifies how storytelling, rumor, and spectacle can immortalize a figure. These narratives reveal the human attraction to extremes, the blurred boundary between legend and reality, and the enduring impact of perception in shaping history. Caligula's life continues to provoke curiosity, debate, and reflection, reminding us of the complexities of power and legacy. Ultimately, studying Caligula offers insight into leadership, perception, and the making of legends. His extraordinary behavior, combined with rumor and historical storytelling, created a lasting narrative that still captivates centuries later. The emperor's life encourages reflection on how societies interpret power, how human behavior is contextualized, and how myth can overshadow reality. Caligula becomes a mirror, showing not just the risks of unchecked authority, but also society's fascination with extremes, leaving a legacy that challenges assumptions about history, psychology, and the art of rule. Caligula's relationship with the military was a key element of his authority. Soldiers admired his charisma, daring, and willingness to share in their victories, creating a bond that reinforced loyalty. He frequently inspected troops personally, sometimes joining campaigns and sharing spoils, which endeared him to the legions. Yet his unpredictable temperament also instilled caution. Soldiers never knew when an act of generosity might be paired with sudden cruelty or an eccentric command. This balance of admiration and fear solidified his control over Rome's military apparatus, allowing him to maintain power despite tensions with the Senate. By engaging directly with the troops, Caligula demonstrated an understanding of influence, showing that loyalty could be cultivated as much through spectacle and personal attention as through strategic reward. Despite his young age, Caligula demonstrated remarkable political awareness. He understood that perception mattered as much as action. Public appearances, speeches, and ceremonies were carefully staged to impress citizens and intimidate rivals. The emperor used visual symbolism, dramatic gestures, and audacious declarations to craft a narrative of divinity, unpredictability, and absolute authority. Modern observers may interpret some actions as impulsive, yet within the context of Rome, they functioned as performance art in the political arena. Caligula's manipulation of perception highlights the power of narrative and governance, showing how history can be influenced by presentation, rumor, and spectacle, just as much as by policy or strategy. One of the most debated aspects of Caligula's reign is the apparent contradiction between cruelty and generosity. While he allegedly humiliated or executed senators, he also distributed wealth, hosted grand games, and engaged directly with citizens. This duality kept both the elite and common people uncertain, creating an environment of suspense and fascination. The unpredictability reinforced his authority. Fear maintained control over potential rivals, while generosity secured public support. Such contradictions challenge modern assumptions about leadership, suggesting that extremity in behavior can be a deliberate strategy rather than mere eccentricity. In this sense, Caligula's rule was as theatrical as it was political, blurring lines between madness, strategy, and performance. Caligula's use of fear as a political tool extended beyond personal displays. He cultivated a court culture in which unpredictability reigned, ensuring that both allies and opponents tread lightly. Rumors, public punishments, and unusual decrees created psychological tension that reinforced his supremacy. By making the consequences of disobedience uncertain, he encouraged conformity without needing constant enforcement. This environment exemplifies how perception and emotion can be leveraged as instruments of power. The emperor's mastery of psychological influence demonstrates that authority is not only about law or military might, but also about understanding human behavior and expectation. The emperor's architectural and engineering projects reflected both ambition and desire for legacy. Bridges, aqueducts, and temples were built on grand scales, demonstrating innovation, power, and divine association, while lavish spending drew criticism. These constructions served practical, political, and symbolic purposes. Citizens witnessed the emperor's power materially, reinforcing awe and loyalty. Monuments functioned as enduring reminders of authority, ensuring that even if Caligula's personal reputation fluctuated, the physical mark of his reign remained permanent. In this way, architecture became a tool for influence, blending spectacle with strategy and creating tangible evidence of imperial grandeur. Caligula's social interactions often mirrored theatricality, blending charm with intimidation. Guests at banquets might find themselves alternately flattered, frightened, or bewildered, reinforcing awareness of the emperor's unpredictability. Such social performance created a unique court culture in which attention and obedience were constantly negotiated. Modern interpretations may view these behaviors as erratic or cruel, yet in context, they were sophisticated exercises in social control. The emperor understood that influence extended beyond policy and military command, reaching into everyday human interactions, and that perception could shape loyalty, fear, and admiration simultaneously. Historical accounts of Caligula's eccentricities sometimes verge on myth. Stories of conversations with gods, bizarre punishments, or outrageous decrees were widely circulated and likely exaggerated. Yet even as embellishments, these tales highlight the enduring fascination with extremes of power. They serve as cautionary tales, entertainment, and insight into Roman political culture. The interplay between reality and exaggeration emphasizes that Caligula's legend was shaped as much by narrative and perception as by action. His life demonstrates how historical memory is constructed, showing the enduring power of storytelling in defining reputation and legacy. Modern scholars emphasize context when assessing Caligula. Political instability, inherited pressures, and absolute authority at a young age may have influenced behavior interpreted as madness. Understanding these factors reveals how environment, psychology, and culture shaped decision-making in extreme circumstances. Caligula's actions illustrate that historical judgments must account for societal, psychological, and political context, reminding us that leaders' choices are often intertwined with their environment, perception, and personal history. The enduring fascination with Caligula lies in the tension between myth and reality. Dramatic accounts of extravagance, cruelty, and divine pretension captivate audiences because they are emotionally charged, memorable, and morally provocative. Even if some events were exaggerated or fabricated, they shape the narrative that has persisted for centuries. This narrative highlights how history is a blend of fact and interpretation, reminding modern readers that perception often has as much impact as reality. Caligula's story demonstrates the power of storytelling in shaping legacy and the human fascination with extremes of behavior and authority. Ultimately, Caligula's reign encourages reflection on leadership, perception, and the human attraction to extremes, whether through spectacle, rumor, or personal behavior. His actions revealed the complex interplay between power, psychology, and narrative. The emperor's life remains a source of intrigue because it challenges conventional assumptions about authority, sanity, and legacy. Studying Caligula provides insight into how perception, myth, and historical storytelling shape the memory of rulers, showing that legend can endure as vividly as reality. Caligula's personality combined charisma, theatricality, and unpredictability in ways that continue to fascinate historians. His public appearances, often dramatic and unconventional, captured attention and shaped perception. Citizens were alternately entertained, awed, or intimidated, reinforcing his authority through psychological influence, whether his actions stemmed from strategic calculation, genuine eccentricity, or psychological strain. They created a ruler impossible to ignore. The emperor's ability to manipulate perception demonstrates the timeless principle that influence often relies as much on performance and storytelling as on policy or law. Caligula's charisma was inseparable from his unpredictability, making his reign one of the most vivid examples of leadership shaped by spectacle and perception. The emperor's use of rumor and information control was sophisticated. He ensured that news of his actions, whether acts of generosity or cruelty, spread in ways that magnified impact. By controlling the narrative, he shaped public perception, turning ordinary events into symbols of power. This manipulation of information shows early recognition of the psychological elements of governance, where fear, admiration, and gossip could reinforce authority. Caligula's reign highlights that the management of perception can be as crucial to leadership as military or political strength, demonstrating a keen understanding of human behavior and social dynamics in Rome. Despite tales of cruelty, Caligula also displayed moments of generosity and charm. He hosted public games, gave gifts, and engaged with citizens in ways that fostered loyalty and admiration. These actions demonstrate a complex ruler, balancing fear and favor to maintain control. The contradictions between benevolence and cruelty created an unpredictable environment, ensuring that both elite and common citizens remained attentive and cautious. Modern perspectives might interpret these dualities as erratic, yet in the context of Roman politics, they functioned strategically to secure loyalty, manage risk, and consolidate authority. Caligula's dual approach reflects a deep understanding of power dynamics, reputation, and human psychology. Caligula's architectural projects were symbols of ambition and authority. Temples, aqueducts, and palaces were built with grandeur and attention to spectacle. These constructions showcased power materially, allowing citizens to experience the emperor's influence tangibly. The projects were also political tools, demonstrating innovation, reinforcing loyalty, and leaving an enduring mark on Rome. Lavish spending may have attracted criticism, but it amplified visibility, reinforced divine associations, and ensured that the emperor's presence was felt even beyond personal interactions. In this way, architecture became a medium for influence, blending utility, symbolism, and psychological impact into the fabric of Rome. The psychological dynamics of Caligula's court were shaped by fear, admiration, and performance. Courtiers navigated social interactions carefully, knowing that missteps could lead to humiliation or worse. Banquets, ceremonies, and official gatherings became stages for social negotiation, where attention, favor, and loyalty were constantly assessed. The emperor's unpredictability ensured that no one felt entirely secure, reinforcing authority without constant enforcement. Caligula's mastery of court dynamics illustrates how leadership extends beyond policy, law, or military might to the subtle realm of perception, social cues, and emotional influence. His reign exemplifies how psychological strategy can sustain power in a complex political environment. Legends surrounding Caligula's behavior often border on myth, blending fact with exaggeration. Tales of conversations with gods, outrageous decrees, and eccentric acts capture imagination while shaping his historical reputation. Even when accounts are sensationalized, they provide insight into Roman culture, highlighting the fascination with extremes of power and behavior. The interplay between truth and embellishment emphasizes that history is as much about narrative as action. Caligula's life demonstrates how extraordinary stories, whether accurate or not, can define a ruler's legacy for generations, showing the enduring influence of perception and storytelling in historical memory. Modern analysis considers context when interpreting Caligula's actions. Political instability, inherited pressures, and the isolation of supreme authority likely influence behaviors deemed mad by contemporaries. Understanding these factors allows a more nuanced view, recognizing the impact of environment, psychology, and culture on Caligula's reign exemplifies the challenges of assessing historical figures, reminding us that leadership is shaped not only by character but also by circumstance, societal expectations, and the weight of perception. Context helps bridge the gap between legend and reality, offering insight into how extraordinary authority interacts with human nature. Caligula's fascination with divinity and symbolism highlights his strategic awareness. By asserting connections to the divine, he elevated authority above tradition and rivals, reinforcing obedience and awe. Religious symbolism was more than personal ambition. It functioned as a tool for political influence, shaping how citizens and elites perceived power. Modern observers may see this behavior as audacious or irrational, yet in Roman society, it was calculated theatricality. Caligula's use of divinity illustrates the intersection of politics, performance, and belief, showing how symbolism can amplify authority and contribute to a ruler's enduring legend. The combination of spectacle, rumor, and extreme behavior created a lasting fascination with Caligula. Public games, eccentric acts, and dramatic gestures ensured attention remained focused on the emperor, reinforcing authority and shaping perception. The interplay of fear and admiration, generosity and cruelty, performance and reality, made him a complex figure whose legacy endures in historical narratives and popular imagination. Caligula's story illustrates how extremes of behavior capture attention and shape memory, emphasizing that leadership often relies as much on psychological influence in storytelling as on policy or force. Ultimately, Caligula's reign serves as a lesson in perception, power, and narrative. His life demonstrates how extraordinary behavior, amplified by rumor and storytelling, can define legacy and influence long after death. The emperor's combination of charisma, unpredictability, and theatricality created a ruler whose impact extended beyond deeds to the stories and myths that outlived him. Studying Caligula provides insight into human fascination with extremes, the psychology of leadership, and the enduring power of narrative in shaping history. Caligula's reign demonstrates how spectacle can be a form of political control. His grand games, public feasts, and dramatic displays captured the imagination of citizens, blending entertainment with influence. These events reinforced loyalty and awe, while diverting attention from political tensions. By transforming governance into performance, he created a memorable and compelling presence that was difficult to challenge. The combination of showmanship and authority highlights the power of perception, revealing that leadership relies as much on narrative and visibility as on policy or military might. Caligula's approach remains a compelling example of the psychology of influence in history. The emperor's unpredictable nature made him both feared and fascinating. Courtiers, senators, and soldiers were constantly uncertain how he would act, whether generous, cruel, or eccentric. This unpredictability amplified his authority, as individuals became cautious and compliant to avoid missteps. Fear and admiration were intertwined, creating a dynamic where loyalty was constantly tested. Modern observers may interpret these behaviors as impulsive or irrational, yet in context, they function strategically, shaping perception and consolidating power. Caligula's reign exemplifies the interplay between personality, environment, and political necessity. In shaping historical legacy, Caligula's relationship with his family played a significant role in his life. Raised amid political intrigue, betrayal, and danger, he witnessed power struggles that likely influenced his behavior. The dynamics with his mother, sisters, and extended family exposed him to both manipulation and survival tactics. These experiences may explain some of the actions contemporaries labeled as madness. Understanding the familial and political pressures on Caligula allows a more nuanced view of his reign, highlighting how upbringing and environment intersect with absolute authority to produce extraordinary behavior. Stories of Caligula's eccentricities, such as conversations with gods or bizarre decrees, illustrate the blend of reality and legend that defines his reputation. Even if exaggerated, these tales reveal cultural fascination with extremes and serve as insights into Roman societal expectations. The narratives emphasize how perception shapes history. As the emperor's legend persisted long after his death, Caligula's story demonstrates that a ruler's reputation can be constructed as much by storytelling and myth as by actual deeds, leaving a legacy that continues to captivate and provoke discussion. Public generosity and extravagant spending were key components of Caligula's strategy. By hosting games, distributing wealth, and engaging with citizens, he cultivated loyalty and admiration. These actions counterbalanced fear and unpredictability, creating a complex image that blended charisma with authority. In Roman society, where appearances mattered, such generosity was a powerful tool. Caligula's ability to balance extremes illustrates the sophisticated interplay of perception, psychological influence, and political strategy, highlighting that leadership often relies on careful manipulation of both public and private image. Caligula's architectural projects reflected ambition, authority, and legacy. Temples, aqueducts, and palaces were constructed on grand scales, showcasing innovation and divine association. Citizens experienced his power materially, while the projects themselves served as enduring symbols of authority. Criticism of lavish spending existed, but the visibility and psychological impact of monumental construction reinforced his influence. Architecture became both functional and symbolic, blending governance with spectacle. These projects highlight how rulers can shape perception and memory through tangible, lasting achievements that extend influence beyond personal presence. The emperor's engagement with the military reinforced loyalty and power. Soldiers admired his charisma and daring, which helped secure allegiance even amid unpredictability. By sharing victories, inspecting troops personally, and engaging in campaigns, he strengthened bonds with the legions. Yet the same unpredictability also kept soldiers cautious, demonstrating the balance of respect and fear as tools of influence. Caligula's relationship with the military illustrates the importance of personal attention, presence, and psychological strategy in maintaining authority, especially in a society where loyalty could determine survival. Caligula's alleged cruelty served as a psychological tool, reinforcing control over elites and courtiers. Reports of humiliation, threats, or execution may have been exaggerated, but fear functioned as an instrument of authority. By keeping powerful individuals uncertain, the emperor maintained dominance without constant enforcement. The interplay between fear and spectacle highlights his understanding of human psychology and the subtle tools of governance. Even in cases where narratives were sensationalized, they contributed to a reputation that amplified perception and ensured obedience, showing that influence often extends beyond law or military power into the realm of social and psychological manipulation. Divine claims and symbolism were central to Caligula's image. By demanding worship, constructing temples, and presenting himself as connected to the gods, he elevated authority beyond tradition. This reinforced obedience and awe. While consolidating power, religious symbolism was both political and psychological, shaping perception among citizens and elites. Modern observers may see audacity in these acts, yet within Roman culture, they were deliberate, theatrical strategies. Caligula's use of divinity illustrates the intersection of performance, belief, and governance, showing how perception and symbolism can be wielded as powerful instruments of authority. Ultimately, Caligula's life and reign provide enduring lessons about perception, power, and legacy. His combination of spectacle, rumor, generosity, cruelty, and divinity created a complex figure whose influence extended beyond deeds to narrative and myth. The emperor's story demonstrates how historical memory is shaped as much by storytelling, exaggeration, and perception as by actual events. Studying Caligula encourages reflection on leadership, human psychology, and the fascination with extremes, revealing how perception, myth, and strategy intertwine to create a ruler whose legend persists centuries later.